Good evening. I think we're live. All right. Good afternoon, everyone. I am joined right now by WWL TV Channel 4 morning meteorologist Dave Nussbaum, just to talk a little bit about hurricane season, right? June 1st will be the beginning of hurricane season. We're also dealing with a pandemic, but we know it's important, even more so now than ever, that our residents are prepared for hurricane season. So I'll allow Mr. Nussbaum just to introduce himself. We have a couple of questions that were sent in previously. We'll go through those questions, and please feel free to ask any questions during this brief live.
Well, thanks for having me. Appreciate that. First time I'm meeting you since you're new in office, and
Thank you.
this is your new first hurricane season coming up. And it's quite a doozy it may end up being out there.
I hope not. I hope not, but that's why we're going to lean on the experts, and we'll get right into the questions. The first question is, what is your best advice to those who are scared of hurricane season with an ongoing pandemic?
So definitely going to be a unique season with that. If you take the pandemic aside from what we're looking at here, it is expected to be an active hurricane season. The last couple have been active. We've already had one named Storm Arthur, which is still out in the Atlantic at this time, but it's no threat to Louisiana. But we're still expecting some of the features to come together to make it pretty active. They're talking roughly, on average, 16 to 18 named storms out there. 9, 10 of them could become hurricanes, and 3 or so could become major hurricanes. Normal is about 12 for a given season, so you can see we're going to be a little bit above. That's not to say they're coming to Louisiana. That's not to say we'll get any of them around here, but there is obviously that chance every year. So the first thing you need to do is be prepared as if there was no pandemic. Just be prepared for hurricane season. Have your kits ready at home. Have things to go. Have a plan. We always say in the state of Louisiana, get a game plan. What's the game plan? Do you know where you're going to go? Do you know what evacuation routes you have to take? So learn that first. Then we factor in the pandemic. Can you go to certain places? Will the hotels be open? Will the places outside of Louisiana, if you have to evacuate to Mississippi or Texas or Mississippi or Alabama even, are those areas going to be open? Some of those questions we don't have answers to yet. I know everyone, all the parish presidents locally here and the state officials in Mississippi and Texas, of course, are working on all that. And time, of course, is running out because June 1st is around the corner. But you just need to have, one, your plan, and then 2, let's see if that plan can work. Can you go visit relatives that live in maybe Baton Rouge or maybe up in Jackson, Mississippi or something? Is it okay to go visit them? Sometimes being with family is a little bit easier with social distancing purposes versus trying to go out in public. If you're in your car, evacuating, that's fine because you have your family in the car. You're not talking to other people. So just be aware that we're going to see a lot of changes coming. If, that's a big if, we have to do this. Hopefully, we never have to worry about it, and this is just a good trial run for us in the future.
Will your forecast models change due to coronavirus?
Nothing's going to change. I mean, the way we do forecasting will be the exact same because that's not going to have a huge impact. The only impact that might be felt initially is, you probably saw, I posted this on my Meteorologist Dave Nussbaum Facebook page, is that a lot of the weather data we get not only comes from weather balloons and weather stations and ships and things all around the country, but airplanes. When they take off and they land, they transmit weather data. Well, obviously, there have not been as many people flying with the whole pandemic going on. So there's a little less data coming from there. Does that have a significant impact on the models? It might have a little impact. The researchers are studying that now to see, will that play a role? But if the storm is coming, we have the hurricane hunters that are going to fly, that are going to transmit data. So all of that data goes into the models anyway. So it's not going to have a huge, huge impact. But something down the road we'll see, where the data is how much, if a difference, if any at all, was there seen out there. So to answer the question, nothing's really going to change.
Right.
I'm going to do my forecast in the same way as we have in the past, just to make sure we get the most accurate forecast.
And I guess the $1 million question is, do you think this hurricane season will be an active one?
Yeah, I mean, we talked about that a little bit ago. It does look active. And here's why. We have global weather features we look at, not just what's happening here in the United States. The big one is, it's called El Nino or La Nina. Now, with El Nino, that is the unusual warming of the Pacific waters off the coast of Peru and kind of stretch the way over toward Australia, that part of the globe. When that happens, that means there's a lot of wind shear in the Atlantic, and we do not have as much storms when you have a lot of wind shear. The storms can't build up. The wind shear rips them apart. That's a good thing. This year looks like it's going to be the opposite of that, of La Nina, which is the cooling of the waters of the Pacific. And that's actually happening right now. Question will be, how strong does it get? And it doesn't look to be very strong, but just enough out there to produce less wind shear, which means we can get more storms to pop up. The other thing we're looking at, the Gulf waters are already very warm. We're still in the mid-70s off Louisiana coast, lower 80s as you get down to the southern part of the Gulf. You need 80 as a minimum temperature for a storm to sustain itself. And now the Atlantic, it's already pretty warm too. So the La Nina and the warmer Atlantic waters kind of lead us to believe we'll have an active season. Again, if one comes here or not, that's the question. Let's hope and pray that doesn't happen, but obviously now time to be prepared.
Right. Can you explain storm surge in simple terms? What does that mean when we send out alerts to residents that say 3 to 5 feet of storm surge?
Sure. So when a hurricane's coming onshore here, hurricane's an area of low pressure. So it's putting pressure down in the water. Plus you have the winds tied in with that as well too. Well, as that pressure goes down, that and the storm is moving to a northern direction toward Louisiana, we are going to continue seeing that whole water kind of being pushed toward us. When it hits the coast, it's got to spread out, and it spread out over the land area. So when that happens, that allows it to go move inland. Of course, here in Louisiana, we don't have much elevation, so it's going to be spreading in any little place it can do. So that's why we talk about New Orleans, it's city of South, obviously below sea level. But you get out here towards St. John Parish, yeah, you're up a little bit higher in elevation here, but we still have Lake Pontchartrain to deal with. And so the water may come into the lake, and as it comes on in, if it can't get into parts of Orleans or Jefferson Parish, it continues moving till it finds a place to go. So you get into St. Charles, St. John, across the North Shore as well too. So those areas, including where we are now, will have to be very, very cautious of what this does. If it's a significant level of surge, then obviously we're going to have to deal with some surge flooding here. But what happens is that since the elevation isn't very high, that water just keeps going. If we had a big cliff at the coast, we would have nothing to worry about. But obviously, where the coast is not designed that way, it's not like the West Coast of the United States where they have these beautiful cliffs you can see. Kind of be nice if we did. It would make things a little easier when it comes to that. But so that water just continues to push in, and it will go for miles inland because there's nothing to stop it.
No barrier to stop it.
And then once the winds change direction, come out of the north, it goes back out. Now, if the storm hits farther off to our east, when the counterclockwise flow around a hurricane, we'd have more northerly winds, so the surge would not be as high. If it hit over toward Lafayette or Lake Charles area or Houston, we'd have the more onshore winds, and that would make the water levels higher over here. So if we have to get hit by a storm nearby, we prefer it being east of us than it would be west of us.
Is that when the meteorologist will say we're on the dry side of the storm?
That's right, the dry side versus the wet side, or sometimes they say dirty side, just because it's all messy with the rain and wind and everything. So, like when we had Katrina hit, obviously that hit the Mississippi coast. And so we were just off to the west of it, but the highest surge was from New Orleans to the Mississippi coast. When Rita hit, we had a big surge. If you remember Hurricane Ike back in 2008, it didn't hit Louisiana, but we had about an 8 to 12 foot surge because it went due west and pushed all that water across the Gulf Coast. So it all depends on where that storm is oriented to how much water we pushed and how, of course, strong. If it's a weak tropical storm, it's not going to be a surge event, it'll be a rain event.
And we had some damage here for Ike and Gustav. They happened at the same time.
Yeah, those two, 2008 was pretty busy for us.
Let's see, what sources do you use to prepare your forecast, and where do you get data from?
So all over the place. When we are looking at hurricane stuff, of course, we use what the Hurricane Center has to find out what they are looking at, and they're the official forecast too. So leading up to it, that's kind of what we look at to judge what we're going to see, if we're in the cone, if we're not in the cone, and things like that. But we'll also look at all the other forecast models. You hear the American model, you hear the European model, the various others out there. So you can't just say, oh, I'm picking that model, that's the one I'm going to work with this hurricane. You have to look what's called for trends. Which one has been right so far? So this storm may be the American model, okay? The next one may not be that one. That may be way out to lunch, but you're like, that's not going to happen. So you have to see what is happening now. Is the model agreeing with what that is. And then we'll show those spaghetti model plots that everyone loves seeing. It's the worst thing in the world that we show on TV, because if there's one that spikes to Louisiana, that's the one everyone likes to say is coming. Oh, one model says it's coming here. It's like, well, it doesn't quite work that way. So you have to look at the whole thing. What I look at when I show that, and what everyone else should look at, is the trend. From what I showed in the morning to what we show in the evening to what we show tomorrow, is it the same? Has it changed? How much has it changed? That's what I'm looking at to see where the storm's going. And then the hardest thing is the intensity. And that's what the Hurricane Center forecasters and us, we try to get the best we can with that. But sometimes that's really difficult, like we saw with Michael that hit Florida, ramped up to a Cat 5 until landfall. So those are the things that are still we're working on to try to get better with, but definitely the most accurate thing we have now is forecasting the track, and that seems to be kind of what we're looking at with the more accurate ways to get an idea where things are going.
All right, and I guess I'll touch on that when we talk about being prepared. This is a smaller version. We have this on our on our website. This is our new hurricane preparedness guide, and I encourage every one of the residents of St. John and really anywhere else. It's a very useful guide to, especially more so now with coronavirus, make sure that you have a plan in place. Make sure that you're not in a situation where we have to evacuate and you're unsure of where to go. Even if you need additional masks and things like that, hand sanitizer, things that you may need to think about evacuating with that you never had to think about evacuating with before, because you may evacuate to a place that requires you to have a mask, even if it's a hotel and you don't have one or anything. You just want to make sure that you protect yourself and cover all of the bases. We have all of our emergency contact information in here. Like I said, this is a small version. We mailed one out for everyone in the full-size version. All of the evacuation routes will be on here. Also, remember that some of this could actually change just with the pandemic. And then we have all of the post-disaster resources in one complete case, so that if we do get hit by a hurricane and there's a recovery after the disaster, that you know where to find all of those resources along with all of our contact information. And then we have the 10-step plan and the survival kit. All of this is in there. And also, if you have pets, make sure that your evacuation plan includes your four-legged family members as well. You don't want to get somewhere that doesn't accept pets, and so you want to make sure that you have a plan for them. And so all of this is on the brochure. So I encourage all of the residents to we're mailing copies, and then we also have a copy on our website that you can just download and print there. It'll be a little bit easier. Usually we put copies out at libraries and things like that. They're closed right now. Once they open, we will have copies there. But please, I'm just asking everyone to be prepared. We saw just last week, we had this unique weather event. I read in the paper it was a 500 and 1,000 year weather event. Now that I'm saying that, explain that. When we hear that this is a 500-year weather event, what does that mean?
It just, when we talk about it, and it's kind of a complicated thing, but the simple thing is, it's just that when you have a huge rain events over a short period of time, it's more kind of like insurance adjusters and everything kind of base everything off of that. It just means like this type of event should not happen except for during that time frame. Okay. So a 100-year event doesn't mean it's going to happen every once in 100 years. It just means it shouldn't happen very often. You get to 500 or 1,000, it should be very rare. And we don't get a lot of those. We, unfortunately, Louisiana have gotten more in recent times. But at least something that's, doesn't happen every time we have a thunderstorm,
Right.
The setup we had the other day, there was this little upper level low kind of spinning, to kind of be technical with that. It went across Louisiana slowly, and one of those bands just set up from the Gulf straight through St. John Parish, heading up to the North Shore. North Shore got almost 17 inches of rain. Down here, it ranged from about 2 inches to about 9-10 inches of rain. And we all know when you get that much rain in a few hour period, you're going to flood. Whether you're in Louisiana, Texas, pick a state, you're going to flood. And so we did have a lot of that street flooding out there. And so that we did have a number of homes that had water in them, then I have to deal with that as well. So this is just something, and now that we're kind of transitioning into summertime, Now we have to deal with the afternoon thunderstorms that pop
Right.
up. And sometimes they're the ones that can drop 5 inches of rain in 30 minutes, and then we have the same thing again. So it's just one of those things that little upper level low didn't come through. We wouldn't have had as worse of a situation as we did. Finally, that had kicked out after a day, and weather got better. But the only, if you want to say any kind of good thing from that rain event, is we were in a moderate to severe drought. So that has just about been wiped out.
Right.
So there's that for the farmers. But obviously that's probably too much of a good thing. You don't want to have 5 inches of rain falling in a couple hour period. So, but yeah, so those events we still have to watch out for, even aside from hurricane season. And same thing, like where do you go if you have one of those? Your home's flooded, it has to be gutted. Now what can you do? Can you go to a hotel? Can you go to a family member's house? So with the pandemic out there, that does make it a little bit more challenging for everyone.
Right, and the need to prepare. And we had several homes, not that many. We had a few homes that had water here in St. John, but right in St. Charles, almost 200 homes with an event that would have never caused any water damage. And on the North Shore, I saw that they were actually rescuing people in this 500 year storm. Just to touch on that, and I was actually out there for the event in some of our more problematic areas, with pumps and things like that. All of the pumps that we do have, we don't have to turn them on. The pumps that we have, they come on automatically. And to explain it in the simplest way that the engineers can explain it for me is it works like the back of your toilet. And the pumps will come on once the water gets to a certain level, then the pumps trigger on. All of our pumps are operated that way, and actually our pump technicians can see all of the pumps and the water levels from their phone. So it's very sophisticated. It's not how it used to be a long time ago, years and years and years ago before we had this technology. We've had technology for some time where our pumps automatically come on, so we don't have to manually turn them on unless there's some type of a problem. However, even with the most sophisticated pumping systems, you have two things. One, you can pump an inch of rain in the first hour and a half of inch every subsequent hour after that. But even with the most sophisticated pumping systems, everybody's still pumping to the same place, which is in the lake. So when the lake is backed up and everything's backed up, you still have to allow for just the water to naturally subside a little bit so that all of the pressure can be relieved. So when you get that much rain, and in some instances, 8-9 inches of rain in a short period of time, we're going to have that flooding. How you can help us, and we've begun to start to gather debris from ditches and try and clean catch basins. Make sure that your catch basin is clear. If there's anything obstructing it, just help us out that way. But it's our pumps come on automatically. However, there will be times where the rain is going to outpace the pumping systems. Hopefully we don't have that this year with any type of event, whether it's rain or hurricane or anything like that. But it's better to be prepared for the storm that doesn't come than to not be prepared for the one that does. And so that would be my advice. And if anyone needs any assistance with making their preparations, please call our office. If there's any question, you need any type of help, please call our office and email our office. We are more than willing to help just guide anyone through this process. Thinking about bad weather for some people, it can give you a little anxiety, and we're here to help. That's what we're here to do. So please pick up the phone and call us at any time, and we'll be more than glad to assist you with your planning. If there's anything else, I guess, you have a few questions. Sorry about that. Sorry about that. Explain how pressure reading is as important as wind speed for hurricane forecasting.
So when you have the lower the pressure of a storm, traditionally the stronger the storm, and that means the storm's gotten a lot bigger, there's more thunderstorms with it, and the winds tend to pick up when that happens. So as the storm's circulating, the counterclockwise circulation, you've got the thunderstorms popping up out there like in a stronger hurricane, and then the winds will pick up in intensity. So if the pressure is, a normal pressure would be 10-19 inches of mercury, millibars. So that's like today, great weather out there, beautiful weather, high pressure sitting over top of us, no problems. When you get a hurricane, the pressure will drop down below 1,000 millibars to maybe 950 or something like that. Katrina at one point was about 902 millibars. and that's when it was a Category 5 in the middle of the Gulf of Mexico. So the lower the pressure, the stronger those winds are. That storm is really, really strong, and as a meteorologist, we'll call it tightly wound up, and that's where you see that really well-defined eye of the hurricane, and that's what allows us to get those stronger winds with it too. So we're talking a tropical system with this one as well too, but even still, a system coming across, if a cold front's going to come through or something like that in the wintertime, if it's a low enough pressure, we'll get strong winds tied in with that as well. So but that's a good question with that. And one thing I forgot to mention before is just because the cone may not be in Louisiana, you always have to see the impacts outside of the cone. Sometimes a Category 1 hurricane can be much more destructive than just a stronger hurricane. A slow-moving hurricane, like we saw with Isaac back in 2012, seriously did a role for us here in St. John Parish and much of Louisiana. It sat along the coast off of Grand Isle for 24 hours, and intensified to a weak hurricane. So the impacts, the worst of the storm for us isn't necessarily wind, it's the heavy rain and surge. That's what takes the most lives from a tropical system. So we're very astute with how water works in Louisiana, which is good, but sometimes we can't really run from it very fast enough, and so we do have to deal with some of those problems.
Well, Mr. Nussbaum, I thank you very much, and you can find him on WWL-TV, Channel 4, Meteorologist in the morning. Please tune in. Best way to stay prepared is to just stay informed, so we thank you for tuning in today. Thank you.
See you tomorrow morning, and WUPL.